And boom, according to that, I am live. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight. My name is Hiko Simon. It's 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time. Yeah, same time as always, at least in Japan time. Don't know what time it is in your part of the world. Good to see we've got Cobras Tenshi in there first again, 2 weeks in a row. So congrats on that. 6 people viewing, 2 likes. So thank you for those. Hope everyone's had a good week and is doing well. Getting colder, but getting that nice. It's actually kind of colder, but still it gets cold at night, but it's like 19 degrees and sunny during the day here. So we've had a pretty good week. Um, and yeah, Japan is, COVID is getting worse, although not quite at the rapid rate that it was before, but we're up to about 10,000 cases a day. I'll talk a little bit about that in the show today. But yes, heading into December, heading into the already well and truly in Japan, even before Halloween, there were some Christmas trees and stuff out. So yeah, we're sort of heading into the Christmas season here, and I guess a lot of people are watching the. I still call it soccer. I think even in New Zealand, we've all sort of acknowledged that we should call it football, and I think people are increasingly calling it that. I still call it soccer. I mean, there's 10 different types of football, but yeah, Japan honestly played a pretty crap game against Costa Rica and lost after beating Germany. I mean, that was starting to get a little bit interesting earlier on in the week. But I must admit, I really found it hard to get into the idea of watching a World Cup with the Qatar thing and just how ridiculous things are, where FIFA's going to be like yellow carding players that wear symbols of support for LGBTQ, like the idea that that's even controversial and that FIFA's going to actually like sanction players on that. So the whole thing just the thousands of people that have died building the stadiums and the all the issues and so on. And the thing is, as much as I've always wanted to visit Dubai and I'd love to visit the Middle East, so I'd love to visit um, Bahrain is supposed to be great. Egypt is supposed to be great. There are places in the Middle East I'd like to go, and I'm interested to learn about Doha and Qatar. But I must say, normally where it is a chance for these countries to put forward a kind of a propaganda sort of tourism promotion of themselves, and they have a lot of tourists going there, and there are a lot of tourist shows being made about Qatar. I don't really feel very motivated, particularly to go and add Qatar to the list of places I have to see before I die, based on all of this. So yeah, credit to the Saudi Arabian soccer team that yes, made it interesting beating Argentina, and Japan adding to that, beating Germany, of course. So it's always things like that, I suppose, that make the World Cup interesting. And so, yeah, I guess I'm watching it a little bit now, but curious if other people are watching and who you're supporting, if you are supporting. Um, and yeah, not many viewers at the moment, but yes, I guess I did, as always, I put the notice up at the last minute. As usual, if you want to get my attention, two ways to do it. You can ask me a question using the YouTube poll feature, which is just outside of the screen cap here, but it's at the top of the chat there if you want to drop me a question, which I'll check from time to time. But otherwise, just in the chat, just write my name, Hiko Simon, and it will flash up orange, and you can do that if you want to say hello, if you want to leave a request or a question or whatever, I can do that. News-wise, it's been a quiet week, I guess. But still got a few topics out, a lot of discussion. It's kind of, I guess, interesting to continue to watch the bonfire that Twitter is continuing to be. I do feel like the the polls to bring back famous people and to bring to let all the trolls come back onto Twitter. It feels a bit like the scene in Ghostbusters where the EPA, I mean, it's kind of funny how that movie villainizes the EPA so much, but yes, how the EPA guy comes in and lets all the ghosts out of the vault. It kind of feels a bit like that at the moment. I guess I haven't seen too much of that. I haven't been slimed per se, but yeah, it doesn't feel like a good way for a person who's financed a takeover of that company where they have to generate $1 billion a year just to pay off the interest on the loans taken to be able to acquire Twitter. And knowing that Twitter wasn't making money before, but seeing it like affirmatively setting itself on fire, it seems at the moment. I must admit, I'm kind of looking on wondering, yeah, I really want Twitter to survive. And, for me, Twitter was just good. It was just working, and I'm sorry it wasn't making that much money. But now they've like lost all they're cutting their infrastructure spend with Google. They're firing, half of their employees. They've lost half of their advertisers. I really do worry if it's going to survive there or not. I still have a huge community there, 13,000 people following. And that is still what I base this show on, and so I do hope it survives. But that said, I have set up a Mastodon, a Hiko Simon at famichiki.jp, and I'm enjoying the extra community over there, and I'm pretty much now posting equally on both sites now. So, you can follow me over there if that's what you're into. How is everyone there? The chat is very, very quiet, almost too quiet. Makes me wonder if something is not working, but I see that it's live. Say hello if you're in there, please. Say hello, say where you are, because it is unusual for it to be this quiet. It's making me jumpy that there's something wrong. Let me quickly check the poll. Is there anything going on in the questions? There is not. Back to the live chat. Oh, now what's happening there? I don't know why the live chat wasn't updating before, but now I can see the chat comments, so that is strange, but good to see. Now we've got indeed the J-Vlog. Good to see you. Salutations. Aaron, let's go. Indeed. Ada Void, good morning. Good morning, Arizona. Good to see you. Theodore Sharp, you're going to come back to Japan on Tuesday. Well, welcome back to Japan. Congrats on that. You're in America right now. That's awesome. And yeah, we've got everybody in there. So yeah, I don't know what was up with the comments not refreshing before, but it seems to be fixed. Yeah. Anyway, well, I guess I might as well just dive straight into the topics, since that's pretty much it at the moment. This was actually from a topic that I posted last week, but I didn't mention in last week's show. But it's kind of funny. Yo, Ben Duncan, good to see you, and congrats as well on the big career moves there. But yeah, good to see you there in the chat. So yeah, this has generated a ton of chat on Twitter throughout the week. In fact, still going now. This is still the thing I'm getting the most replies on. It's something I posted 8 days ago. Well, I have it listed as 8 days ago, but it says here that the comment was from 6 days. The article is from 6 days ago, which is an article saying that more than 1 in 3 Japanese working women in survey would rather be housewives. And interesting, just looking at the results statistically, apparently the survey was done by Sony Life Insurance with 1,000 women between the ages of 20 and 69. And when asked, would you actually prefer to be these were women who are professionals working, so not asking housewives, asking women who are working for a living, would you actually want to be a housewife? Women aged 20 to 29, 33% said yes, 40% said no, 41% said no. For women in their 30s, the majority, 43.2% said yeah, they would prefer to be a housewife, while 33.3% said no. For 40 to 49, 30.3% said that they would prefer to be a housewife, 41% said no. And then as it gets older, it declines, 28.7% in their 50s and 24% in their 60s. And interesting seeing the discussions there. So going in both directions. Some of the comments pointing out how yeah, the prospects for women working, the career prospects are not great, and particularly when people get into their 30s, perhaps they see that, and why would you want to stay working in terrible working conditions in a Japanese company where you're underappreciated and don't have career prospects? And that is true, although it's changing, but it's not changing fast enough. Some other a lot of men took the opportunity to respond to say, well, yeah, what about house husbands? I mean, I would like to be a house husband. I think a lot of people saying that they'd prefer to be house husbands. In fact, the other thing, the trend about with the ages and so on being interesting, kind of perhaps reflects some idealism about what being a housewife entails. And indeed, seeing the number of men saying, oh, yeah, I'd love to be a house husband, I think shows men as well also probably not knowing what it entails. I'm really bothered by the comments not appearing to refresh, even though this is the live chat thing. I'm just going to refresh this again, because I guess it's not refreshing. I'm just going to refresh the browser actually. Hope that doesn't mess it up. Because I'm like, there we go. Theodore Sharp, thank you for moving the chat along and confirming that you can be a house husband. So a couple of things with this, however. First of all, it is true, or at least many, many years ago, back in the early 2000s, I guess, when I was single and when I lived in Kashiwa, northern sort of suburb of Tokyo, actually in Chiba. And and I'd hang out with my surfer friends, and we'd go out, drinking and so on. And sometimes I'd go to gokon, like matchmaking parties and stuff like that. And I would say it was probably about a third of people that I met. You just want to get to know someone, and you say, hey, what do you want to do with your life? What do when you're in your early 20s, you ask people, hey, so where do you want to end up? And I was surprised at the percentage of women in Japan that would answer, oh, I want to be a housewife. Um, and because I'd never met a single, I don't think I've ever, well, again, I left New Zealand when I was 23, but I don't think I ever met anyone in my life in New Zealand once who at the age of 23 said that their life's goal was to be a housewife. In fact, economically, I think it's pretty much impossible, even in Japan, let alone other places nowadays. So one, I was taken aback that what you don't have, like you don't want to be like an astronaut. At least you don't have the dream of be like, you know, you can say that you want to be like a, like you want to own $1 billion company or something like that and still be a housewife. Like you're just going to like give up on having the dreams from the outset was kind of my reaction to that. But it came up a lot. I kind of learned over time the way that I interpret partly the large rate of aspiration towards being a housewife in Japan. I think it probably is going down over time, particularly as people realize that it's just not feasible and as career prospects are improving over time. When I first came to Japan in the early 2000s, there was no real career prospects at all. Even in companies that were considered to be progressive, there was still no career path. And it was expected that women who were hired as new hires, like with me, were expected that they were going to marry other people from the company. In fact, I worked at a large Japanese insurance company where they had matchmaking companies, like basically almost organized by the company. It used to be a thing in the 60s and 70s that Japanese companies didn't want people marrying people from competitors and so on. So they would actually encourage people to marry inside the company to protect, like, confidential information and stuff like that. So the companies would even promote intra-office relationships, which again sounds, some people, if you think about it for like half a second, it sounds wonderful. Then if you think about it for like 2 seconds, you realize, oh no, that could end up a real mess, and it can. But that's what people do. They go in there, and because the companies don't expect more, they don't have the opportunities to do, to have careers and so on. That's definitely changing. The other thing is, I think that's in Japan, when you talk about being a housewife, or one, being a housewife is not easy, or not or necessarily fun. Especially in Japan, you think about the burdens of neighborhood associations, of stuff associated with garbage, or stuff associated with having a kid at school, and PTA obligations and school obligations, and all of that is on top of all of the fact that often you have to look after the grandparents, as well as you have to. It's not just kids; you have to look after multiple generations, particularly if you marry the eldest. Um, However, then you might ask, why would anyone want to aspire to that? And I think a lot of women probably see their own mothers who come from that generation where women like are sort of household managers, where they run everything at home. And when I say they run everything, that includes like the husband's salary. Like the husbands, it's a very common situation that you get these miserable salary men who are sort of browbeaten. They stay long at work because they're afraid and miserable when they get home. Their wives try to control them from going to hostess clubs by only giving them like pocket money of 500 yen for lunch every day or whatever, and don't allow them access to their own money. And I know foreigners who have married Japanese and been in that situation, because that's and that's partly what sometimes is what's expected, from the Japanese side. That they expect that they're going to completely dominate the life of the person that they're going to marry. So it's a lot of work, but at the same time, they also do that. And this kind of stereotype, there is a stereotype that Japanese perpetuate as much as misinformed foreigners, how Japan is a country of samurai men who beat their wives and dominate their castles of homes with submissive Japanese women that they marry. I know this is a stereotype, and anyone who believes that's obviously just never been inside a Japanese home or met a real Japanese family. At least like if you've been in a homestay situation, or if you have like Japanese friends, and it's actually really unusual to meet friends at home in Japan in a way that you can see their family lives or start to hear about their family lives. But if you ever do, you'll understand that, in spite of the perception that I think is perpetuated by Japanese men, that, oh yes, we're completely in charge, we're the dominant powers in our households. Everyone knows that's not true. If you live in Japan, the women in Japan, are absolutely more often than not, the absolute dominant. They control the money, they control everything about what the men can do, and and not only that, but men being sent when they go to travel for work, they go on their own. And again, I've heard situations where, like for example, a guy at work was telling me a couple of months ago how his wife and kids were telling them that they were going off for a trip to France during the summer vacations, and they didn't buy a ticket for him. I mean, they were doing it with his money. So it's on the one hand. So again, I can understand how people, when they see how powerful household, how traditional Japanese housewives are, that's something which actually probably appeals, and they think that if they just get a guy who's earning a lot of money, that they'll get to take over the husband's money and run the house. And they might have more idealized versions of that based on movies or whatever, or dramas or whatever. But again, the idea that they're going to be happy doing that, and that men who want to marry housewives are going to be happy, maybe it's something based on looking at their parents and so on. But it's something which really doesn't happen very much anymore. And you can see that perhaps women in their 30s to 40s, perhaps this is where they realize how that they don't want to become like a senior manager at work, and they see how miserable that work is, and maybe they think it's also perhaps when most people are having kids nowadays. So that's the other reason why it might make sense that they want to quit the job and focus on having kids. But as you can see, there's as the ages get older, there's not so much of a preference, but the numbers are surprisingly high. And hearing the views from both sides, I don't think a lot of men in particular really understand what it means for a woman to be a housewife in Japan, especially in this day and age. And it's an increasingly rare thing. I mean, frankly, imagine in America being a full-time housewife and how much money, or house husband, because that also happens nowadays. But to have a house with a single income, normally, I'd say it's probably more normal nowadays for most homes to be two income, i.e., for it to even be able to consider it, you'd have to be earning, comfortably more than two people earn on the working half of the relationship. Which nowadays in America, if you're in a large city, I think that would be $200,000 plus, right? Really, for that to even start to be sort of feasible. I mean, maybe, sure, you could probably do it on less than that, but that's the kind of thing. So I don't know. It is interesting that it's true for me as well. I was shocked to meet so many people here who said that they want to be housewives. And when you ask her, what hobbies do you have? And it's like, oh, I'll have any hobby that you want. Which sounds great, but trust me, that changes very, very fast once you're married. It's not my situation, by the way. I'm not in a traditional, my wife works, and we keep separate, money control and so on. So it's a bit more Western like that in my case. But I know a lot of people who are married in Japan and ended up in the traditional situation, and a lot of them are happy. But I think that's a surprise that a lot of people fall into. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, and it's a surprise, but I think it probably reflects both the misery of Japanese working life, and maybe some sort of idealism and some misunderstandings on both sides. It's an interesting, some interesting discussions there anyway. Aaron, indeed, smash the like button. Good to see you in here. I want to be a house husband. Also, famous last words. Hell yes. Um, hey, again, not to disrespect people that sincerely do and are, and it happens. But I think when they do it out of a sense that, oh, that sounds easy. I suspect there are more men who think it is easy to be a housewife than there are women. But I think there are people on both sides who probably underestimate how much work is involved in that. Cobra Senshi, and with women in the late 20s and whole 30s, there is this thing called, oh my god, Torschlusspange, Torschlussspanish. So the fear to never be a mother. Oh, the biological clock ticking, like Marissa Tomei on My Cousin Vinny, which is one of my favorite movies ever. Yes, there is that. Although, yeah, I suppose even men feel that. Even I felt that, I guess. But yeah, crypto airy motherhood revered in the past. Now it's a status thing. You got a good catch. Um, yeah. I mean, nowadays the problem is more than anything just it's especially in places like Tokyo, it's just an inconvenience to be a parent. It's just not a child friendly city. It's a city made for people who are living in single person apartments and having lots of hobbies and doing what they like. And you lose all of that, frankly, when you get married, and particularly when you have kids. And Tokyo is just not good for that. So even as a status thing, I think it sort of is declining, and the birth rates reflect that. Ian Macaulay, Ohio, good to see you. Ian Macaulay, good to see you in there. And yeah, Maddie, good to see you, Maddie. We've got Odie Jr., good morning. Boom, indeed. PB, Orion's belt is a big waste of space. Bad joke, 3 stars. Internet, yes. The multiple layer of astronomical dad jokes I very much appreciate. No other planetary jokes, please. Let's move on to the next topic. Yeah, of course, I just mentioned before about the surprise win this week with, in fact, I am to say, oh, it won't even load. There's a photo of an adorable otter putting the ball. How every World Cup, the thing is, of course, if you get 3 animals, like a squid and an octopus and an otter, and you get them to pick who's going to win the soccer game, statistics are that, at least one of those 3 animals is going to be right, maybe even 2. There was a squid, I remember, in the last World Cup I think it was an octopus. I mean, octopi, of course, being incredibly smart creatures, but people started to, like, some of them have very, like, surprisingly above the statistical mean hit rates. So far, there was only one game. I don't know if the otter predicted Japan was going to lose to Costa Rica, but it did predict the unlikely outcome that Japan was going to beat Germany, and is now being hailed that the otter was correct. However, I think that the result tonight is probably very disappointing to people. I think Japan has to beat Spain now, which I don't think is going to happen. It'll be interesting to see how Spain goes against Germany, of course. But yeah, Japan could be toast now. So that's pretty much what's happening on that. Another thing, if you live in Tokyo, or if you're coming to Tokyo, if you live in a couple of other big cities, just very interesting that if you use the Google Maps app, and let's face it, I mean, who uses Apple Maps? I think I remember, I've never been able to find the post again, but there was a great Reddit post when, basically at some point Steve Jobs, when the original iPhone came out, had to admit that the original Apple Maps was a disaster. Like, people were driving into lakes. The maps were so bad and they were causing so much chaos. At one point, he had to sort of admit, we screwed up and we're going to start all over again. And of course, everyone was installing Google Maps onto their phones. And there's a skit on Reddit, someone talking about, Steve Jobs calls the boss of the Apple Maps division into his office and says, "You're fired now. Get out of here." And no, not that door. That's the closet. No, the other door. No, the one on the left. No, stop. Some kind of a dialogue like that, just implying that yes, the Apple Maps person couldn't get out of a room. Yeah, so it turns out that the AR interface, where I'm looking forward to AR glasses, where these things will have little screens visible inside them, which are hopefully coming from Apple next year. I've been asking for these for 10 years. I'm waiting. They're late. But yeah, just from the camera on the phone, there is a feature that you can have in some big cities where they've got the street view good enough that you can just hold up your camera wherever you are, and the combination of the GPS and allowing it to use your camera, it'll orient you. So it'll be able to tell which direction you're walking in and say, hey, cross the road or go up this way. It's just one of the things with Google Maps is that, it can be really awkward because the compass is so inaccurate. You don't know which way to face. This feature of actually matching a real-time view of where you are with actually labeling the buildings and telling you where you've got to go for when you're using Google Maps. That's going to become activated next week in Japan, which will be pretty cool. It'll be a lot more convenient. It shows again how well they've just gathered data on the city. So if you're coming to Japan, like Theodore Sharp is, it'll be great for getting around. There'll be tons more, it'll be the Google Maps app is going to become more useful. And that'll work on iOS and Android. So I'm looking forward to playing around with that myself. So pretty cool. Couldn't rank it. No worries. Good to have you in here. So that is a cool thing. Yeah, I mentioned COVID before. Numbers are going up, and there's a prediction because everybody's sort of lost their immunity completely, but by being basically staying at home and washing their hands and gargling and being so protective about coronavirus, about COVID, that everybody hasn't caught like flu for like 3 years. So now there's an expectation this year that both flu and coronavirus are likely to be big this winter in Japan. And of course, there's now as we go into the 8th wave of the pandemic here in Japan, Um, it seems to have been very late to this, but the government seems to be realizing the utility of having more of these rapid antigen tests for COVID, and to use these for testing at home rather than making people come into crowded hospitals, which clog up the hospitals and increase risk of cross infection at the hospitals. So they're actually creating the one the government's promoting for this wave of using these self-testing test kits more, so that they can have people self-diagnose before coming into hospitals. But the other thing is that they're promoting so they're going to make these more available. They've only just given permission to start selling the COVID ones, like on the internet, like at least government authorized ones. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that they're promoting these dual test kits because, the symptoms are going to be quite similar. There'll be a fever, there'll be runny nose, coughing, all that, the same stuff for both flu and coronavirus. So apparently, yeah, they'll be promoting these RAT tests, these rapid antigen tests that will test for both flu and coronavirus at the same time. So if you get a fever, you'll be able to diagnose which is the problem, if either. So kind of good news. Again, like, why has this taken 2 years? Like, this could have saved a lot of resources a long time ago. But good to see, at least better late than never, I suppose. And yeah, I'm going to buy a ton of these things. I am going into work a lot more often now. And as I go back into work, I'm honestly, yeah, I'm kind of over working remotely. As much as I can work remotely, and as much as it's convenient, and I do like taking like a run in the middle of the day and so on, the being able to communicate like loosely with people at work is just so helpful, and you get I'm so much more productive. I know you should be productive at home, and I try to be productive at home. I think I was for a while, but as soon as I went back to the office, yeah, it kind of changed. I was much more productive in the office, and I felt less productive at home. That's just me. But of course, that means I'm commuting more and numbers are going up, and I'm being around more people. I'm at more risk. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I know that Japan is nowhere near like Europe and America, where everyone, I don't know that everyone's immune per se. I think people just don't care anymore, pretty much. The numbers, by all accounts, are still actually still pretty high, but people are just choosing to move on, unlike China and so on. But it does seem that there is some degree of, when you've had it, particularly mild cases, that you'll experience when you catch it with weaker symptoms. And the situation here is that nobody's really had it, so everyone's still pretty vulnerable when these things come through, including myself. I don't think I've had it. So that's the biggest concern, catching it that first time, which almost seems inevitable. It seems like catching the cold or the flu at this point, like in terms of inevitability. And of course, it can be serious. So yeah, I'm taking care with that. But hopefully, these things will become more available soon. I am thinking about getting my fourth shot, by the way. I got my free shot thing in the mail. But I am thinking, if I have to go to America, I might have to go to America early next year. I might just time the shot before I go to America, so I've got like maximum immunity when I go over there, because I must admit that kind of freaks me out a little bit. But yeah, that's where I'm at with that. Kerberos Tenshi, as AR navigation only made it into cars recently, it might take a bit longer for glasses to have that feature. I think that's what the glasses will be for, frankly. I think that's what AR glasses. I mean, that's the magic thing. And I assume that Google will be working on making Google Maps work with that. And I think that's why they're working on making the AR work with the phone camera right now. And it'll just be using a camera that's built into glasses. As you know, I've been expecting self-driving cars and AR glasses and everything for a long time now. I always demand technology that I expect to be normalized like 10 years before it happens. I was complaining for years before the iPhone came out. I had these Japanese feature phones, and I was listing off the features that I wanted. You could browse the internet, but not the real internet. You could watch movies, but it was kind of clunky, and the transfers were bad. And I said, when the net, streams up and everything, I kind of wanted what became a smartphone before they really came out. So yeah, I'm on this as well. I think with these glasses, I expect that the first couple of generations will be clunky, but I'm pretty sure that actually navigation is going to be like a default feature. And one thing I'm really looking forward to is being able to do things like running with smart glasses on, and being able to see in real time without having to look down at my arm. And being able to like orienteer, to be able to run through. At the moment, I run courses that I know, but the idea of being able to, navigate new and unfamiliar areas, like with a map showing and with directions showing in front of what I can see, that'd be awesome, And think about things like hiking and sightseeing and being a tourist and stuff like that. It'll be awesome. I actually think that Google Maps, or some equivalent of that on AR glasses, is absolutely going to be the killer app of AR glasses. I don't think it's going to be games. I don't think it's going to be office productivity. I would love to have a office productivity where I put glasses on and I can see like monitors like I have in front of me now, except I don't have to pay for them, and I expect that will happen. But I really think the first killer app is going to be navigation, and I think that's going to be a big deal. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm just thinking purely of what I would pay for and what I would use first, but that's what I'm thinking. Other news we've had this week: Dentsu, Japan's pretty much monopoly advertising company, kind of famous as being this big, sort of dark monopolist. Sort of, I mean, they literally, in terms of advertising, there's a, you imagine Madison Avenue, where every building is controlled by the same company, or they're all affiliates of, of that one big company. And of course, as we've mentioned in previous weeks, there is an unfolding scandal involving how with the Olympics, how basically Dentsu got all of the sort of key contracts for advertising, for running events associated with the Olympics. They got them at high prices, and many of the bids were uncontested. And now it's being shown up that like 9 companies got together and actually even made an Excel sheet where they actually agreed to divvy up which contracts would go to who and whom and for how much. And it was complete, organized, orchestrated bid rigging. There is a question to me. First of all, of course, so what's happened in response to that is that the competition regulator, as always happens in Japan, they show up at the company on a surprise raid to go and gather evidence that they were, that they were collaborating and running a cartel to basically manipulate and rig public tax-funded tenders. But yet at the same time that they show up for the surprise raid, the media somehow knows to be in front of the building at that exact moment and film the government agents going into the building to raid it, i.e. they tip off the media in advance to go and do it. Someone on Twitter said that they know a week in advance, which is rubbish. But I'm pretty sure they do get a call the day before, or maybe even a few hours before. And, the Japanese Kisha Club folks know that if they're told going to be a big high-profile raid at Dentsu, get there now, they'll jump in the back van and they'll go over there and they'll film it. The thing is, of course, Dentsu, of course, just being in complete control of all advertising and marketing in Japan, including like political advertising, and they are probably them. It's hard to think off the top of my head of a company that would be more influential or powerful in Japan than Dentsu, just in terms of like a sort of an evil megacorp. So, I was joking myself that when the investigators got into the Dentsu headquarters, they probably the fastest way to go through raiding the building would be to ask everyone not involved in corruption to come through first, just to speed things up. But yeah, the question is, of course, it starts with this. But then the question is, you've got former Prime Minister Mori and a lot of prominent politicians and business people involved with the organization of the Olympics itself. I mean, Tokyo Governor Koike and so on. And there's a question how much they were complicit in allowing Dentsu to rig these, because it's kind of like patently obvious when all of these contracts were uncontested and all went to Dentsu. That outcome, I mean, either the most sympathetic view that you can do is just the thought that, well, Dentsu's going to get it anyway, so there's no point even competing because they've probably done something. But the fact that there wasn't even competition on a lot of these bids, and that there was a lot of money involved, like something like $70 million. Yeah, this is going to spread and be spectacular. I think this could end up, I mean, in the end of the day, though, I mean, you talk about if there's a company more powerful than the Japanese government, it's Dentsu. So the idea of them getting taken down, it would be on the scale of like the recruit scandal in the 1980s. But at the same time, I mean, it's kind of not only obvious, but assumed that they did it. Like basically, most of the internet comments are saying, I mean, why are they just doing this now? I mean, of course they rigged all the bids, but there's no, how could you expect anything else? So, but there is an expectation that this is going to spread, and it's probably going to spread into the realm of politics. So that's going to be interesting anyway to see what will happen. Yeah, Ben Duncan got it for the first time today. Ordered Uber Eats every day. Your order was never late or wrong. I used to Uber Eats when I went back to America, and the driver threw the food on the ground. That's not a very good. I bet they get upset if you don't tip them either for that in America. Oh, I think I'm missing a part of a conversation there. While in quarantine. Oh, yes, well, in immigration quarantine. Or did you have COVID? Is that it? Sorry to hear that anyway, but I'm glad that you were able to get Uber Eats. Oh, you had COVID and you were quarantining because you had COVID and you had Uber Eats. And the order was good. Well, I'm glad that the order was okay. I mean, honestly, it's kind of weird for it to expect it not to be on time or okay. But I'm glad that part of it was okay. I'm sorry that you had COVID. I hope you get better soon. Cobras Tenchi, you once worked for Dentsu more or less. You sold your voice for. I mean, Dentsu is just a megalith. It's got so many affiliates and it touches everything to do with broadcasting and media and advertising in Japan. So it's kind of unavoidable if you get into that. You sold your voice for AU radio commercial. Wasn't sure about doing it, but the money was good and you were young and you needed the money. That's okay. Believe me. I have friends who I'm not really in touch with now, but some of the most interesting people I've ever met were creative people who worked at Dentsu. Creatives at Dentsu. You think an advertising company is like, what do you think the percentage of creative people would be? I was told by the people there, it's like by different people who've been there, it's like 97% salespeople and executives and so on. It's like 1% are actually creative. It's a great place to be creative because everything you make becomes like a nationwide advertising campaign or whatever. But they're a very small percentage, and it's very competitive to go for those jobs. But yeah, pretty good. Oh, sorry to hear about that. Oh, that was over the summer, but okay, I'm glad to hear that you're good. In crazy news, and by the way, I guess I should preface this by saying that I wasn't aware. I missed the memo that since 2010, like every other sort of print media, previously reasonably respected and trustworthy. I mean, I always thought of Newsweek magazine as being a bit like Time, like not being great, not being like The Economist, but being good enough and respectable enough as a brand. Yeah, it turned out they've turned into a dumpster fire of conspiracy theories and news of the world and stuff like that. So when I first saw that this insane conspiracy propaganda theory was published in Newsweek, I was like, what? But then a lot of people pointed out to me that no, Newsweek has been a complete, trash fire for 12 years now. So yeah, that informs somewhat. But apparently, leaked FSB letters, um, which just on just the fact that this is based on supposedly leaked internal KGB memos or whatever. Yeah, apparently last summer, Vladimir was there sitting in his office flipping a coin, thinking, should I invade Ukraine or should I invade Japan? Because both would make complete sense, and would be equally viable. A whistleblower from from Russia's FSB. Um, I mean, yes, this is garbage. Just where this comes from. An email featuring a letter. So an email featuring, I don't know if it's attached or forwarding, featuring a letter from a whistleblower. So, no, this is not credible. But it's fun. I mean, if you like this kind of thing. So yeah. Apparently, according to the definitely fake news. Apparently that they were beginning to step up propaganda against Japan, which they were definitely doing last year. That is true. Japan and Russia, basically, Japan is whatever Russia says, and Russia, acts crazy over the. Fundamentally, the issue is the return of the Northeast Territories, which you can see on this map. They're the islands that are sort of green in the very top corner there. I wonder if I can zoom in there. It's these little islands, these four islands, sometimes called the Southern Kurils, referred to Japan as the Northeast Territories. I've talked about them on the show before. Japan just basically never accepted that these four islands. There's a whole island chain from Kamchatka Peninsula to Japan called the Kuril Islands. Japan asserts that those four islands are not part of the Kuril Island chain. There's a small gap to the rest of the Kuril Islands, and it doesn't claim that the Kuril Islands are part of Japan. Those are Russia, that's fine. But it does claim that those four islands right beside Hokkaido, those have been inhabited parts of Japanese territory since Hokkaido was basically incorporated into Japanese territory. I mean, there's a lot of traditional Ainu people who have lived there, since forever. But that's basically part of Japan, and there's a ton of people who live on those large islands. There are large towns on those islands, and those people were kicked out when Russia came in after Japan surrendered. At the end of World War II, Russia decided, oh, that looks like a good time to invade, and they started to rush into Japan. Um, and they grabbed these islands, of course, as well as the southern half of Sakhalin Island and some other things. And they basically they deported all of the people from those islands, and they're basically living Right on the closest part to that green island there that you can see, there's a town called Nemuro where all of the former residents live. They actually have a deal with Russia that they can, the former residents can visit those islands without having to go through passport controls. The Japanese government set up an arrangement that they don't have to acknowledge Russian sovereignty, that they're allowed like a free pass to go there to go visit their family graves and go tidy them up and see their old homes. But those homes, of course, are now lived in by Russian people. They have been, ironically, actually, many of the people who live on those 4 islands are Ukrainian, who were deported there by Stalin to populate the islands after they took it off the Japanese at the end of World War II. But yeah, so they're inhabited by Russians. They have been now for like 70 years. But the Japanese inhabitants, Japanese being Japanese, I mean, half of them are still alive. Even though they're like 100 years old. And Japanese governments maintained, all along, basically, oh, yeah, those are ours, and yes, Russia, we understand that you've got them, and please just give them back whenever you're ready. And Russia keeps saying, well, we're not giving them back. You lost the war; they're ours. And Japan's like, okay, that's fine, just give them back whenever you're ready. And in 1956, Brezhnev was about to give them back. He actually made a plan that they agreed with Japan to give them back. But he died, and I think Khrushchev came in and said deals off. And basically, as Japan has been negotiating energy deals, and they gave Putin a puppy, and Abe was getting along with Russia, and everyone in Japan felt like, oh, we're getting closer. So you would love to buy lots of oil from you, and we'd love to be friends. And here's a puppy, and we'd like the islands back. And Russia kept freaking out and saying, you're not going to get the islands back. And they even amended the constitution in 2020. Making it a crime punishable by up to 10 years. And they wrote this in the Constitution: if anybody ever gives away any Russian territory to anyone else, or apparently even advocating for the ceding of Russian territory is a crime imprisonable by 10 years in the Russian Constitution now, which is funny because Russia, of course, annexed territories that it has either lost or never even fully, they never fully occupied Kharkiv or Kherson, and yet they annexed those territories when they weren't even in control of them. And this is the problem now that Russian media has. They can't say that it was the smart thing to withdraw from those territories because you can go to prison for that. But that was actually originally aimed at Japan. So yeah, there was this idea that Japan's just not getting a clue. They're just delusional, pretending that Japan's going to keep pretending like these islands. It's like the Costanza. They're pretending that the islands were never taken away and are still only just being temporarily looked after by Russia. And yeah, that's all good, Vladimir. Just whenever you're ready, just give them back, please. And they're still, Russia's full on shouting and abusing Japan back, and Japan's very chill about the whole thing. So yeah, the idea is that there was some tension with Japan around this, about Japan just not getting a clue that Russia was not going to give these islands back. The main reason is, of course, that Japan having those islands could theoretically, partially, I mean, Russia still has the rest of the islands on the chain, but there's an idea that it increases Japan's ability to lock in, of course, another part of this map over here. You see that little white thing over there? That's Vladivostok. That's where Russia keeps its Pacific fleet. And looking out at the ocean from Vladivostok, of course, Japan is pretty much just like a big seawall fencing them in. And the only place that they can get out into the Pacific from here is basically going around Hokkaido and going through these islands. So giving them back to Japan would basically allow Japan to blockade Russia, or at least their Pacific fleet. That's why they don't want to give it back. But yeah, so there was this idea that Japan just can't get a clue. So they had this idea, apparently, according to these people, to this crazy conspiracy theory, that Russia was going to attack Japan. What exactly they would attack doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, given that they're the ones occupying the islands, it would make sense. I mean, it wouldn't really make sense, but it might make sense for Japan to attack Russia, for example. I mean, those islands are very close, and Japan maintains that those are Japanese islands. It might make sense for Japan to attack Russia, particularly now that Russia has all of its military forces and it has all of its resources taken up in Ukraine. I mean, now would be a perfect time. If Japan was an aggressive country, which it is not, it might go and take those islands back. But the idea of Russia's going to attack Japan, like, two problems. I mean, one, attacking Japan is like attacking Germany or Poland. Japan has a security treaty with America. America would immediately have to retaliate against Russia. So it would be completely insane. It would be as insane as attacking any NATO country. In fact, America has more bases and personnel and armor in Japan than anywhere in any other country in the world, and all of that is there and ready to attack Russia back. So it would be insane just for that. But yeah, I mean, then you consider as well, especially you look at the condition of Russia right now and how things are going there. The fact that Japan has this, this issue with Russia, which Japan is being remarkably chilled out about. I mean, it still is actually maintaining a joint gas project on Sakhalin Island with Russia, but it is saying, in terms of the Ukraine thing, it's unambiguous that, homie, don't play that. What you're doing, Russia, is not cool. And Japan is probably, I've seen surveys which show like what percentage of people support Russia and which percentage of people support Ukraine around the world. And, there's some countries like Nicaragua, there's some, Central American countries where people overwhelmingly favor Russia in the dispute with Ukraine. I don't understand how that's possible because I live in Japan, and in Japan, it's like 0% supports Russia on this. Japan's been dealing with Russia's bullshit for decades, 100 centuries even. So they know what Russia's all about, and nobody feels anything but contempt for Russia in this, and sympathy for Ukraine. So much so that, as I talked about last week, I mean, there are a few Russophile politicians who have been saying, why aren't we being more even-handed in the media and showing sympathy for Russia too? And the answer is because they invaded Ukraine. It should be simple and obvious. The funny part about this as well is that while Russia are probably afraid that maybe Japan might want to take advantage of their situation in Ukraine, did some very loud exercises where they were doing live fire. They actually had forces on those islands where they were doing live fire. They were moving ships back and forth. They were doing joint exercises with the Chinese military in the Sea of Japan. And they were trying to make a big fuss about, Japan, Russia acting aggressive, looking like they could attack Japan at any time. So don't screw with us, Japan. And Japan responded to that by saying to America, this was back in October, hey, these HIMARS things, Russia, they seem to work really well. How about, why don't we do some joint exercises? just doing some target practice with some HIMARS, and let's just pick somewhere random on the map, like as close as possible to Russia. Why don't we just do that? And Russia was very, very, very upset that Japan is practicing. I don't know how many HIMARS Japan has. Ukraine has 26 HIMARS, and it is, of course, handing Russia's ass to it at the moment with that. Just 26 artillery pieces. I mean, very fancy artillery, but artillery. Japan probably has like a bazillion of these, and apparently when they so Russia's show of force was literally moving rusty troop trucks on the back of barges back and forth in front of Japan, and Japan was literally watching these ships, showing rusty equipment on these old ships moving back and forth, going, okay, yes, very, very, very impressive, calm yourself. And then Japan decided to do some target practice with HIMARS, and Russia completely freaked out and said, unacceptable, unacceptable. The Japanese side was warned about the inevitability of adequate response measures in order to block military threats to Russia. I mean, Russia can't do anything, and these HIMARS can hit anything, of course, on those 4 islands if Japan ever decided it wanted to pick off the meager forces that are on those islands and take them back. But Japan's just chill, right? It's not going to do anything. It's like, here, have a puppy. But they also have HIMARS just in case, I mean, not that... Just coincidental. They're just going to do some target practice by Russia. So, in terms of what could be behind this absolute BS story, I mean, apart from the most obvious assumption that Isabel Van Bruggen from Newsweek made it up, if she didn't make it up and someone's doing propaganda games, hell, it could be Russia to make Japan think, don't mess with us because we're local. You don't want to mess with this, but Japan doesn't buy into it all, honestly. They've got no credibility. The other angle could be Ukrainian propaganda, could be putting this out to make, see, Japan, understand you should be more on our side because, look, Russia's, and Japan doesn't need any persuading to support Ukraine on this. So I don't know. It's just a waste of time article. It's complete BS. It's complete BS. I saw it, but it's kind of fun. And it was funny to go through, and I was just curious, how many HIMARS does Japan have? And they did target practice of this in October, and Russia freaked out when they did it, as I guess you would. So, Quint Rankin, Poland's ordered hundreds of HIMARS. I mean, I've heard that, is it Raytheon? I don't know who makes HIMARS in America, but apparently they've told all their staff to, cancel their vacations. No Thanksgiving if you work at the plants that are making the shells, the rocket-propelled shells and the HIMARS units in America, because they're making a lot of money selling those at the moment. I mean, it's... just like the Gulf War sold all of those Patriot systems, and it looks like everybody wants to buy HIMARS now. So good for the American economy, I guess. But Honestly, Russia looks like a joke at the moment. And the other thing to remember, historical context. When the Tsar of Russia was like facing, mounting internal threats and people being unhappy with it, and he thought, let's do a morale. Let's pick a Grenada. Let's do a Grenada. Let's pick a weak country that we can go and invade in a quick, painless victory to feel good about ourselves. Who's someone weak that we can pick a fight with? And yeah, they heard about this sort of country of basically this country that had self-isolated, was stuck decades in the past. Gentle flower people in the Far East, and it'll be a parade. We'll just march through Japan. It'll be an easy win. The Tsar will be popular again, and no doubt that the Tsars will continue to rule Russia for the next 100 years. And that was the Russo-Japanese War of 1904. Shortly shortly followed by defeat by Russia losing, basically like Germany losing to Japan was the Russian army. First time ever a European power lost a significant military conflict to an Asian power. Japan defeated Russia, and of course the Tsar was dead not long after that, and the country became communist for 80 years. And now we have a new Tsar in Russia, and realizing, well, obviously, according to the propaganda piece, he thought about, hey, let's pick a morale-raising war with Japan again. Obviously, that wasn't going to happen, but it does look like that's. I mean, the fact that they reportedly went into Kiev, or they were going into Kiev expecting to be holding like Russian military parades in Kiev within like 3 days of the invasion. So they were expecting a Russo-Japanese war to boost Putin's popularity, and it looks like that worked out exactly the same way as Tsar Nicholas's war against Russia worked out. War against Japan worked out. So history, it's a funny thing, and as much as Putin likes to talk about being an expert at it, yeah, I'm solid C minus. Not doing well. Quint Rankid, have I heard this line? Russia went from having the number 2 military in the world to having the number 2 military in Ukraine. I've not heard that line. In fact, I mean, if Wagner just looks like a violent bunch of gangsters, honestly, but they would probably claim to be better than Russian regular forces, in which case it would be the third. But that is a good line. Quint Rankid, thank you for that. Yeah, more news in Japan. Speaking of just regular corruption and so on. Apparently the Chubu, Kansai, Chugoku, Chubu, and Chugoku power companies in Japan, which are like regional monopolies, all did a deal with each other that they weren't going to sell electricity to each other's customers, and basically allow that all maintain the happy days, that they can charge whatever they like for electricity by in their own markets by agreeing not to compete with each other. The Fair Trade Commission found out about that and has levied the highest fines ever in Japanese history. But of course, this is, again, it's just it's such a typical thing in business and politics in Japan that it's considered to be perfectly okay to have friendly agreements to not compete, because everybody wins except the consumers or the taxpayers. But the contempt, and the belief that this is actually, as I said last week, I've talked with supposedly academic, ethical, qualified lawyers in Japan who have lectured me about it being a great thing, how everyone wins. And no, this is a deal to screw over people who use electricity, which, last I checked, is most people in Kansai, Kyushu, and Kansai, Kyushu, Chubu, and Chugoku. Oh, in fact, wait a minute, it wasn't Kansai. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Chugoku, Kyushu, and Chubu. But, 3 pretty big areas in Japan where they just agreed to rip all these people off, and they're getting penalized for it, and rightly so. A couple more stories to go. First of all, another survey just showing that kids increasingly don't like to use squat toilets. I guess when you have nice toilets at home, you've got the best toilets in the world in Japan. More and more kids cannot use or do not want to use smelly squat toilets that look to me like the kind of a modern day equivalent of an outhouse or a long drop or something like that. And for me, and probably for increasing numbers of Japanese kids, I can't go like 30 seconds. The circulation gets cut off of my legs. I lose my balance, and you don't want to lose your balance when you're squatting over a toilet. That's not always clean either, and it feels like you're crapping on the ground. Again, reportedly, particularly for pooping, It is apparently healthier. It is a good position. It actually fosters good bowel movement. There are positives to it, and there are advocates for it. But if you've got no circulation in your legs and you can't, sit down there, and the result is apparently increasing numbers of kids, like something like, um, what were the numbers? Can't use a toilet at all, 33% of boys and 18% of girls, and can use it but don't like it, like 47%, 55%. So most kids apparently find and so many schools still only have this type of toilet. So now increasingly what happens is these kids who are terrified to use their school toilets hold it all day. And they get home and they either end up suffering medical issues from constipation, or they just like run straight for the toilet when they get home. I think, personally, not just because I struggle with these toilets myself, but I do think that, this is like the old the Chinese sitting on a plank toilets that they reportedly have, or just like in New Zealand and Australia, like in my parents' generation, it was still quite common to have like outhouses. I think in America, places like that as well. And there's no having them at schools is just horrible. So yes, they've got to do that. Hey, Aaron's got to head out, but thank you for being in here. Um, yeah, still a solid pass, definitely. It's a pass, but yeah, not a good pass. Anyway, have a good day, Aaron, and thank you for joining us. Final stories for the day. I'm going to wrap up myself. Yes, right now, while the government has the again more than 50% disapproval ratings, it turns out a new LDP minister for the reconstruction of Fukushima minister apparently was paying regular membership fees to it's the abusive cult Unification Church. Apparently, they claim it was a magazine subscription and they didn't realize what it was for. But they receive electoral support from these cults. People go out and hand out leaflets and do electioneering for them. And again, I mean, not a good look when the government says that they've audited and they've figured out all the people who have ties to the Unification Church and they're cutting all ties. Now they find out that a fourth member of cabinet, they've had 3 resignations in cabinet in the last couple of months, and this new guy, it turns out, was paying a membership fees to the cult that they were cleaning out of government. So not a good look. And yes, I think he's probably going to have to reconstruct the cabinet from this. And honestly, people are starting to say if you have like 4 cabinet ministers resign like within 2 or 3 months and your disapproval rate is more than 50%, Kishida did announce that he's scheduling a January summit with Biden, and I would get out that wet lettuce right now. I don't think he's going to make it to a January. You heard it here first. I think that the very limit of Biden, of Kishida's survivability is maybe he'll get to resign like the week after meeting Biden. That would be like the longest he can survive. But if I was going to bet, I think it's a certainty that he won't see out January. And I'd be very surprised if he survives to see Biden at this rate. That guy's going to have to resign, and I think Kishida's going to have to give it up. And maybe we're going to see Taro Kono. We're going to have to see him. We're going to see him come in as prime minister. And final one, the annual routine of zoos, hilariously doing escaped dangerous animal drills. One thing about Japan is that I've talked about how when we have earthquake drills in Japanese companies, when we had the big earthquake in 2011. We practiced earthquake drills like every few months, and yet when the real big earthquake happened, it was like save yourselves. And I get the feeling it would be like that if a lion actually did escape, because for one thing, it wouldn't be anywhere near as adorable looking as the lion pictured there at the Osaka Zoo, or as cooperative. I mean, that's a very cooperative, tranquilized lion there. But it does make good press, and yes, it's Japan being on brand, and so I respect that. I mean, again, I don't know how a riot shield is going to be helpful against a lion, but there you go. 2 more stories, 3 more stories, 4 more stories. Damn, and we're up on time. Okay, let's go through. Apparently, a police officer in Nagoya was confronted with 2 wild boars, and he shouted at the boars, "Oh, shoot, utsuzo," he shouted out in Japanese, and the boar apparently ran away after hearing that. And people are impressed both at the police officer who is brave enough to stand his ground and shout at animals that charge and can do pretty can kill people. I mean, it's like getting hit by a car, getting hit by a boar running at you at full speed. And they live everywhere in Japan, and they do regularly seriously injure people. So pretty brave of a police officer to stand in front of some civilians and defend them by shouting at the animals. But I'm more impressed with the animals that apparently speak fluent Japanese. Those boars are getting smart. I mean, if they can understand the instructions of the police officer, I think we have bigger problems. So anyway, always Nagoya that you get the crazy stories. A new subway line for the 2040s, which seems like forever now, but interesting. They're planning a new subway line to leave Tokyo Station and head out towards Odaiba to Ariake Tokyo Big Site Station in Odaiba, going through Ginza, Tsukiji, Kachidoki, which are all pretty cool neighborhoods. Harumi, I don't really know what's there, but yeah, sort of going underwater. But yeah, looks like that'd be a cool line. I mean, 2040s. It is funny how, I mean, I guess I remember seeing plans for lines that'll open up, like the Oedo line to open up in 2020 when I first got here in 1999. I thought that was ridiculous, but that's the same amount of time. So I guess before you know it, it's going to be there, but that's pretty cool. A lot of talk, of course, about how Japanese supporters clean up after themselves in the stadiums and in the locker rooms. Some people saying, and I think people just being a little bit contrarian, honestly, saying, well, what about you taking away the jobs of those poor work-to-death slave laborers who would be cleaning up the stadium otherwise? I don't know. I think you're doing them a favor, if you ask me. And of course, Japanese are not, some people pointing out as well, of course, that the Japanese spreading this sort of myth that they're these wonderfully tidy people everywhere. Have you been on a Friday night Boninkai season subway train or outside the train stations covered in vomit? Which is it's a reminder. Japanese are not perfect. But I think it's a nice custom that they have, and people saying that you're taking away people's jobs by tidying up oops, hit the wrong button there. Yeah, I think is a little bit much. Final one is just a very good video. The Extra History channel on YouTube that I love has just started a new series on the path to Pearl Harbor. And it's really good. It actually looks in detail at the events that led to Pearl Harbor. And, it wasn't just a sneak attack. There were negotiations, long negotiations going on between Japan and the United States. But even before that, the whole history of how Pearl Harbor was set up and why, and the history of U.S. expansion into the Pacific, and how Japan reacted to that and so on. It goes into all of those things leading up to Pearl Harbor, and they always do such a good job. So highly recommended the Extra Credits channel and the Extra History series that they do. All their series are good, but another one on Japan, so that's a good thing to see. So that is all the topics that I have for tonight. Got through the last 4 topics in 3 minutes, so I think I did pretty well at that. I'm going to go watch some soccer and go to sleep. Have a good week. Stay safe from the Rona, of course, especially if you're in Japan. Welcome if you're coming back to Japan. The yen is still cheap. The weather is good. This is the best time of the year to come here. So stay safe. Hope that you are all well. Thank you for keeping me company. Maybe before I go, I should actually check since I opened up the Ask Me Anything. Were there any questions? There were not. Okay, so that's good. I think the live chat, honestly, it's easier. I don't like to flip back and forth anyway. So thanks for keeping me company. Keep cool. Stay safe. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Mastodon. All that good stuff. I'll see you all next week. And have a good one. Peace. Any stream. Oh, by the way, final thing, just before I go. People were recommending to me, I did start up an Apple Plus account. So I started watching For All Mankind. And I watched that, and it was good, although it was getting not so great at the end of season 3. But I liked it. But now I am watching 4 shows at the same time based on recommendations. I'm watching Mythic Quest, which is surprisingly awesome. Ted Lasso, which everyone said was good. And even when I watched the first couple of episodes, I was like, yeah, it's okay. But now it's getting better, and I am getting into Ted Lasso. I'm up to 4 now. I'm watching The Morning Show, which is good and compelling and well done. And I am also watching Foundation, which Isaac Asimov, my head's getting a bit dizzy at times, but very, very good production values on that show, and I am enjoying it. So thanks to everybody who recommended those shows to me, and I will probably maybe watch another episode of one of those tonight. Anyway, good to see you all. Have a good week. Boom. Peace. Oh, and remember to leave a like. I do appreciate it. Really ending now. Seriously. The show's over. Go home. See you later. Boom.